The stagecoach rattled into Eureka, Nevada on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, carrying a woman who had left everything behind for a promise made through letters, and a man she had never laid eyes upon. Rose Catherine Kensington pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Beside her, her mother Margaret dozed fitfully, her gray head bobbing with each jolt of the wheels. At 72 years old, Margaret had insisted on making this journey despite Rose's protests, despite the doctor's warnings about her weak heart, despite the fact that Rose's letters to Franklin Miles had mentioned only herself as a prospective bride. "Mama, we are almost there," Rose whispered, gently touching her mother's thin shoulder. The older woman's eyes fluttered open, cloudy with age and exhaustion. "Is it a nice town, dear?" Margaret asked, her voice hoarse from the dust they had been breathing for days. Rose looked out at Eureka's Main Street with its rows of wooden buildings, the saloons and general stores, the men on horseback, and the occasional woman hurrying along the boardwalk with her skirts held up against the dirt. It looked like every other western town they had passed through, rough and unpolished and nothing like the genteel streets of Philadelphia they had left behind. "It looks like it has character," Rose said carefully, which made her mother chuckle despite her fatigue. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Wells Fargo office, and Rose's stomach clenched with nervousness. She smoothed down her traveling dress, knowing it was hopelessly wrinkled and stained with dust, despite her best efforts to keep it clean. Her dark hair, which she had carefully pinned that morning in Denver, now hung in limp tendrils around her face. She was 23 years old, passably pretty if not a beauty, and about to meet the man who had agreed to marry her based on a single photograph and a series of carefully composed letters. A hand appeared at the door, offering assistance. Rose took it and stepped down onto the street, then turned to help her mother. Margaret moved slowly, her joints stiff from the long journey, and Rose supported her weight as she descended. "Miss Kensington?" a deep voice asked. Rose turned and found herself looking up at a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of summer sky. He wore worn denim pants, a clean but faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the harsh Nevada sun. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 28 or 30, with strong features and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. His expression was kind but uncertain as he looked from Rose to Margaret and back again. "I am Rose Kensington," she said, proud that her voice did not shake. "And this is my mother, Margaret Kensington. I apologize that I did not mention her in my letters, Mr. Miles. I understand if the circumstances have changed and you would prefer to withdraw your offer." Franklin Miles removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He studied Margaret for a long moment, and Rose saw her mother straighten her spine despite her exhaustion, meeting his gaze with dignity. Then Franklin's face softened into a smile that transformed his serious features. "There is room for family here, Miss Kensington," he said simply. "My ranch is not fancy, but it has space enough for those who need it. Your mother is welcome in my home." Rose felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back quickly. She had been prepared for rejection, for being sent back to Philadelphia with nothing but shame and her mother's disappointed face. Instead, this man she did not know was offering them both sanctuary. "Thank you," she managed to say. "You are very kind, Mr. Miles." "Franklin, please," he said. "And I will call you Rose if that is acceptable. We are to be married after all, so formality seems unnecessary." The word married sent another flutter through Rose's stomach. She nodded, unable to find her voice for a moment. Franklin turned to retrieve their trunks from the top of the stagecoach, lifting them as if they weighed nothing despite Rose knowing how heavy they were. She and her mother had packed everything they owned that was worth bringing, which was not much after her father's debts had been settled. "My wagon is just here," Franklin said, gesturing to a sturdy buckboard hitched to two patient horses. He loaded the trunks into the back with efficient movements, then helped Margaret up onto the seat. Rose climbed up beside her mother, and Franklin swung up on the other side, taking the reins in his capable hands. As they rolled out of Eureka toward the open range, Franklin pointed out various landmarks. The schoolhouse where the children of ranchers and miners gathered 3 days a week. The church with its modest white steeple. The doctor's office, which made Rose glance at her mother with relief. They passed other ranches, some prosperous with well-maintained fences and herds of cattle visible in the distance, others barely hanging on with sagging buildings and sparse livestock. "My place is called the Triple M Ranch," Franklin explained. "It stands for Miles Mountain Meadow, which was what my father named it when he claimed the land back in '65. He and my mother came west after the war, looking for a fresh start. They built the house and the barn and got the first herd established before fever took them both in '74. "I am so sorry," Rose said softly. "That must have been very difficult." Franklin's jaw tightened briefly. "It was. I was 24 and suddenly running a ranch alone. My younger sister Sarah had already married and moved to California with her husband. I hired some ranch hands, but it is lonely work without family." He glanced at Rose, then away. "That is why I answered your advertisement." Rose felt her cheeks warm. She had been desperate when she placed that advertisement in the matrimonial news, seeking a husband out west. Her father had died 6 months earlier, leaving debts that consumed everything they owned. Her mother's sister had offered them a place to stay, but only if they came without Margaret, suggesting she be placed in a poorhouse. Rose would have done almost anything to avoid that fate for her mother. "I was desperate when I wrote that advertisement," Rose admitted. "But I promise you I am a hard worker. I can cook and sew and keep a house. I may not know much about ranch life, but I am willing to learn. And I am old enough not to be a burden," Margaret added with a touch of asperity. "I may be slow, but my hands still work well enough for mending and such." "I will earn my keep, Mr. Miles." Franklin looked surprised. "I did not ask you here to be servants, either of you. Rose will be my wife, and you, Mrs. Kensington, will be family. That means this is your home, not a place of employment." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away quickly, dabbing at her face with a handkerchief. Rose reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking and swaying over the rough road. The landscape around them was beautiful in a stark way, all golden grass and distant purple mountains under an impossibly blue sky. The heat was intense, but a breeze kept it from being unbearable. Rose found herself studying Franklin from the corner of her eye, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the carefully written letters she had received. He had seemed thoughtful and kind in his correspondence, but seeing him in person was different. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, and there was a competence about him that made her feel safe despite barely knowing him. After about an hour, Franklin guided the wagon off the main road onto a smaller track that wound through a shallow valley. They topped a rise, and Rose caught her breath. Below them lay a ranch that was modest but well kept. The house was a sturdy wooden structure with a covered porch and multiple windows that would let in light. A large barn stood nearby, freshly painted red, and various outbuildings dotted the property. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided shade. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and she could see horses in a corral near the barn. "It is beautiful," Rose said sincerely, Franklin's expression brightened with pride. "Thank you. My father chose the location well. The creek never runs dry, even in the hottest summers, and the meadow provides good grazing. We have about 500 head of cattle and 24 horses. It is not the biggest ranch in Nevada, but it is mine, and it supports itself well enough." As they drew closer, a dog came bounding out to meet them, barking joyfully. It was a large brown and white animal with floppy ears and an enthusiastically wagging tail. "That is Jasper," Franklin said with obvious affection. "He thinks he is a fierce guard dog, but he has never met a person he did not like." Jasper danced around the wagon as Franklin brought it to a stop in front of the house. He jumped down and helped Margaret descend, then turned to offer his hand to Rose. When she took it, she felt the strength in his grip and the roughness of his palm against hers. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw uncertainty there that matched her own. A man emerged from the barn, older than Franklin, with graying hair and a weathered face. He walked with a slight limp but moved with purpose. "That is Henry Roberts, my ranch foreman," Franklin explained. "He has been with the Triple M since my father's time. Henry, come meet my bride and her mother." Henry approached with his hat in his hands, his expression polite but reserved. "Madam, Mrs. Kensington, welcome to the Triple M." "Thank you, Mr. Roberts," Rose said. "Just Henry, madam. We do not stand much on ceremony out here." He turned to Franklin. "The men are out checking the north fence line like you asked. Should be back before supper." "Good. Could you help me get these trunks inside?" The two men lifted the heavy trunks, and Franklin led the way into the house. Rose helped her mother up the porch steps and through the front door, then stopped to look around. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the furniture was handmade but solid. Everything was clean, though it had the bare feeling of a place where only men lived. "There are 3 bedrooms," Franklin explained, setting down a trunk. "The largest was my parents', and I have been using it. I thought you and your mother could have it until after the wedding, and I will take the smaller room. Then Mrs. Kensington can have that room for herself." Rose felt her face flame at the mention of sharing a bedroom with Franklin after the wedding. It was foolish to be embarrassed about something so inevitable, but she could not help it. They were strangers, and soon they would be expected to share a bed, to be intimate in ways she could barely imagine. "That is very thoughtful," Margaret said when Rose seemed unable to speak. "When is the wedding to be?" Franklin looked at Rose. "I thought perhaps we should wait a week or so, give you time to settle in and be certain of your decision. I know this is a big change, and I want you to feel sure." Rose appreciated his consideration, but she also knew that waiting would only make her more nervous. Besides, what choice did she really have? They had spent the last of their money getting here. There was no going back. "I am certain," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "I would not have come all this way if I were not. We could marry as soon as arrangements can be made if that suits you." Something shifted in Franklin's expression, a mixture of relief and apprehension. "The circuit preacher is in town this week. I could speak to him tomorrow about performing the ceremony on Saturday. That would give you a few days to prepare at least." "Saturday would be fine," Rose agreed. 4 days. In 4 days she would be married to this man, bound to him legally and spiritually for the rest of her life. The thought was terrifying and strangely thrilling at the same time. Henry left after helping Franklin carry the trunks to the bedrooms, and then Franklin showed them around the house. The kitchen was well stocked with basic supplies, and there was a root cellar for storing vegetables and preserving food. A pump in the kitchen brought water up from a well, which Rose was grateful for after hearing stories of Western women having to carry water from distant streams. The bedrooms were simple, with iron bedsteads and plain quilts, but they were clean, and the windows let in plenty of light. "I will let you rest and freshen up," Franklin said. "I need to check on some things around the ranch, but I will be back in time to make supper, unless you would prefer to cook. I do not mean to presume." "I can cook," Rose assured him. "If you will tell me what you have available and what you like, I would be happy to prepare the meal." Franklin looked relieved. "I am not a good cook," he admitted. "Edible, but not enjoyable. There is salt pork and beans, some potatoes, flour for biscuits if you know how to make them. I brought fresh beef in from town yesterday, so we have that as well." "I will make something," Rose promised. After Franklin left, Rose and Margaret unpacked the essentials from their trunks. Margaret sat on the bed in the large bedroom, looking small and fragile in the unfamiliar space. "Are you all right, Mama?" Rose asked, sitting beside her. "I should be asking you that question," Margaret replied. "You are the one about to marry a stranger for my sake." "Not just for your sake," Rose said firmly. "For both of us. There was nothing left in Philadelphia, Mama. At least here we have a chance at a new life." Margaret took Rose's hand in both of hers. "He seems like a good man, kind. That is worth more than wealth or status." "I think so too," Rose agreed. "I am nervous, but I am also hopeful. That is more than I have felt in a long time." They sat together for a few minutes, drawing comfort from each other's presence as they had done so often since Rose's father died. Then Rose stood and straightened her shoulders. "I should start supper. You rest, Mama. You have had a long journey." In the kitchen, Rose surveyed the supplies and began to form a plan. She found the salt pork and set it to frying, then peeled potatoes and put them on to boil. The beef Franklin had mentioned was in the cold cellar, wrapped in cloth. It was good quality, and she decided to make a simple stew that could feed several people if the ranch hands were expected to eat at the house. While that cooked, she mixed up biscuit dough, grateful that her hands remembered the familiar motions even though her mind was spinning with everything that had happened. As she worked, Rose looked around the kitchen and began to imagine ways to make it more homely. Curtains for the windows, perhaps in a cheerful yellow fabric. Some pottery for the shelves instead of the tin plates and cups currently in use. A braided rug in front of the fireplace for warmth in winter. Small changes that would make this house feel like a home. The sun was sinking toward the mountains when Franklin returned with 3 other men. They were dusty and tired, but they perked up when they smelled food cooking. "Rose, these are my ranch hands," Franklin said. "Tom Bennett, Jack Crawford, and Miguel Santos. Boys, this is my intended Miss Rose Kensington, and her mother is resting in the bedroom." The men removed their hats and mumbled greetings. They were all young, probably close to Rose's age, and they looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and shyness. "Supper is almost ready," Rose told them. "If you would like to wash up, there is water in the basin by the door." They fell over themselves to do as she suggested, and Rose caught Franklin trying to hide a smile. She raised an eyebrow at him and he shrugged. "They are not used to women around the place," he said quietly. "Or good cooking, for that matter." Supper was a success, if the way the men ate was any indication. They cleaned their plates and accepted seconds, and Tom declared the biscuits the best he had tasted since leaving his mother's house in Missouri. Rose felt a warm glow of accomplishment. It was such a small thing, feeding these men, but it made her feel useful and welcome. After the meal, the ranch hands returned to the bunkhouse, and Franklin helped Rose clean up despite her protests that it was not necessary. "I have been washing my own dishes for 4 years," he pointed out. "I think I can manage to help with yours." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Rose washing and Franklin drying. It was domestic and ordinary, and yet it felt significant somehow, this first shared task between them. "You are a good cook," Franklin said. "I meant what I said earlier about you not being here as a servant, but I appreciate good food, and the hands surely do too." "I like cooking," Rose admitted. "It gives me a sense of purpose. These past months in Philadelphia after Father died, I felt so useless. My aunt made it clear we were a burden, and there was nothing I could do to change that. Here, at least, I can contribute." Franklin set down the plate he was drying and turned to face her. "You are not a burden, Rose. Neither is your mother. I want you to understand that. I may not be a wealthy man, but I have enough to support a family. You do not need to earn your place here." Rose looked up at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "Then why did you send for a mail-order bride? You are young, and forgive me for saying so, not unpleasant to look at. You could have found a wife here in Nevada without resorting to advertisements." Franklin's expression became guarded. "There are not many unmarried women in Eureka, and those who are here have their pick of suitors. I am not a smooth talker like some men, and I spend most of my time working the ranch. It seemed simpler to write letters, where I could think about what I wanted to say instead of stumbling over my words." It was such an honest admission that Rose felt her nervousness ease a bit. "I think your letters were very well written," she said. "They showed me who you are better than any smooth talking could have." They finished the dishes, and Franklin showed her where everything went. Margaret emerged from the bedroom looking rested, and they all sat in the main room for a while, talking about inconsequential things. Rose learned that Franklin had fought in the Indian Wars briefly when he was 18, but he did not like to talk about it. He loved horses and hoped to start breeding them in addition to raising cattle. He read whenever he had time, which was not often, and his favorite book was a battered copy of 2 Years Before the Mast that had belonged to his father. As darkness fell, Franklin lit lamps and then excused himself to check on the animals one last time before bed. When he returned, he showed Rose how to bank the fire and lock the doors. "It is safe here," he assured her, "but it is wise to be cautious. If you need anything during the night, my room is just there." He pointed to a door off the main room. "Do not hesitate to wake me." Rose nodded, suddenly aware of how intimate it was, the two of them standing close in the lamplight while her mother had already retired to bed. Franklin seemed to realize it too, and he stepped back. "I will see you in the morning," he said. "Sleep well, Rose." "Good night, Franklin." In the bedroom, Rose changed into her nightgown and slipped under the covers beside her mother. The bed was comfortable, the quilts warm, and she could hear the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the corral, the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees. "What do you think, Mama?" Rose whispered. "Did we make the right choice?" Margaret reached over and patted her hand. "I think we are exactly where we are meant to be, dear. That young man has a good heart. Everything else will sort itself out in time." Rose hoped she was right. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept spinning with thoughts of the wedding on Saturday and everything that would follow. She had made a promise to Franklin, and she intended to keep it. She would be a good wife to him, would help him build his ranch and make a home here in this wild, beautiful place. And perhaps, if they were lucky, they might even find love along the way. The next morning, Rose woke to the sound of roosters crowing and sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, and then memory flooded back. Nevada. The ranch. Franklin. She dressed quickly in a simple work dress and went out to the main room. Franklin was already up, boiling water for coffee on the stove. He looked up when she entered and gave her a tentative smile. "Good morning. I hope we did not wake you too early. The ranch starts at dawn around here." I am used to early mornings, Rose said. What can I do to help? Nothing right now. I am going to ride into Eureka to speak with the preacher about Saturday and pick up some supplies. I thought you might want to come along, see more of the town. Your mother is welcome too, of course, if she feels up to it. Rose considered. I think Mama should rest today. The journey was hard on her, but I would like to go with you if that is all right. I was hoping you would say that, Franklin admitted. It would be good for people to meet you before the wedding. Small towns like to gossip, and it is better if they have facts instead of speculation. After a quick breakfast, Franklin hitched up the wagon again and they set off for Eureka. The morning air was cool and fresh, and Rose found herself enjoying the ride despite her nervousness about meeting the townspeople. Franklin pointed out various features of the landscape, telling her about the silver mining that had made Eureka prosperous, and the various characters who lived in and around the town. In Eureka, Franklin helped her down from the wagon and offered his arm as they walked along the boardwalk. Rose was conscious of people watching them, women whispering behind their hands and men tipping their hats. Franklin seemed unconcerned, nodding to people he knew and introducing Rose when they stopped to talk. The preacher, Reverend Thomas Walsh, was a jovial man in his 50s who welcomed them warmly. So you are the bride Franklin has been expecting. Welcome to Eureka, Miss Kensington. We do not get many new residents, especially young ladies. I am sure you will be a wonderful addition to our community. Thank you, Reverend Walsh, Rose said. I am grateful for the welcome. They discussed the wedding ceremony, which would be simple and held in the church on Saturday afternoon. Rose had nothing special to wear, but Reverend Walsh assured her that did not matter. God cares about the commitment you make, not the dress you wear while making it, he said kindly. Though I am sure you will look lovely no matter what. From the church, they went to the general store where Franklin ordered supplies to be delivered to the ranch. The proprietor, a shrewd-looking man named Albert Pearson, looked Rose over with sharp eyes. So you are Miles' mail-order bride, come all the way from back east, I hear. From Philadelphia, Rose confirmed, trying not to bristle at the term mail-order bride, even though it was accurate. With your elderly mother in tow, Pearson added, and there was something in his tone that Rose did not like. Franklin's expression hardened. Mrs. Kensington is family, Albert. She is welcome at the Triple M, as is anyone I choose to welcome there. Do you have a problem with that? Pearson held up his hands. No problem at all, Franklin, just making conversation. They left the store with Rose feeling unsettled. Not everyone is as accepting as you are, she said quietly. Albert Pearson is a gossip and a busybody, Franklin replied. Do not let him bother you. Most folks around here are good people who mind their own business. As if to prove his point, a woman approached them with a warm smile. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and flour dusting her apron. Franklin Miles, is this your intended? I am Martha Hewitt. My husband and I run the restaurant down the street. Welcome to Eureka, my dear. Rose Kensington, Rose said, instantly liking the woman. Thank you, Mrs. Hewitt. Please call me Martha. We are going to be neighbors after all. You must come by the restaurant sometime. And if you need anything at all, you just let me know. It can be lonely out on those ranches, especially for a woman used to city life. They chatted for a few minutes and Rose felt her spirits lift. Maybe not everyone in Eureka was like Albert Pearson. Maybe she would find friends here, people who would help her adjust to this new life. On the ride back to the ranch, Franklin was quiet, his jaw set in a way that suggested he was troubled about something. What is wrong? Rose asked. He glanced at her, then back at the road. I want you to know that I do not care what people like Albert Pearson think. You and your mother are welcome at my ranch for as long as you want to stay. wedding or no wedding. If you change your mind, if you decide you do not want to marry me after all, I will not send you away. I will help you get established somewhere, help you find work if that is what you want. You are not trapped here." Rose was stunned. "You would do that?" "Even though you sent for me to be your wife." "I sent for you because I was lonely and I wanted a family," Franklin said. "But I do not want a wife who feels obligated or coerced. I want someone who chooses to be with me. If that is not you, I would rather know now than live a lie." Rose looked at this man who was offering her a freedom she had not expected. He could have held her arrival here over her head, could have insisted she keep her end of the bargain. Instead, he was giving her a choice. "I appreciate that more than I can say," Rose told him. "But I have not changed my mind. I want to marry you, Franklin. Maybe not for love, not yet, but for respect and the chance at a good life. I think that is a foundation we can build on." Franklin's expression softened. "I think so too, and Rose, I hope someday it will be for love. I think I could love you given time. I already admire your courage and your devotion to your mother. Those are qualities worth loving." Rose felt her breath catch. "I think I could love you too," she admitted. "You have been kinder to me in 2 days than most people were in months back home. That means something." They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, and Rose felt something shift inside her. She was still nervous about the wedding and everything that would follow, but she was also beginning to feel hopeful. Maybe this marriage would work. Maybe they could be happy together. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Rose learned the rhythms of ranch life, waking early to cook breakfast for the men, spending her days cleaning and organizing the house while her mother rested and did light mending. The evenings were Rose's favorite time, when she and Franklin would sit on the porch after supper and talk. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his plans for the future, about the challenges of raising cattle and horses in Nevada's unpredictable climate. She told him about life in Philadelphia, about her father who had been a kind man but a poor businessman, about her girlhood dreams of adventure that had faded into the practicality of survival. With each conversation, Rose felt the distance between them shrinking. Franklin was not flowery with his words, but he was honest and thoughtful. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and he remembered small details she mentioned. He asked her opinion about things, from what color to paint the barn doors to whether he should expand the cattle herd or focus on horses. It was clear he saw her as a partner, not just a wife who would keep his house. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, Martha Hewitt arrived at the ranch with a large package wrapped in brown paper. "I hope you do not mind the intrusion," she said cheerfully as Rose invited her inside. "But I heard you did not have a wedding dress, and I thought you might like to borrow this." She unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful dress in pale blue silk, far finer than anything Rose had brought with her. "It was my wedding dress," Martha explained. "I have been saving it for my daughter, but she ran off and married a sailor without bothering with fancy clothes. I would be honored if you wore it tomorrow." Rose touched the soft fabric with reverent fingers. "I could not possibly. It is too fine." "Nonsense. A bride should have something special to wear on her wedding day. Try it on. I think it will fit you perfectly." With Margaret's help, Rose slipped into the dress. It needed only minor adjustments to the hem, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the elegant woman staring back. The blue brought out the color of her eyes, and the cut was flattering to her figure. "You look beautiful," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. "Stunning," Martha agreed. "Franklin Miles is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." That night, after Martha left, Rose could barely sleep. Tomorrow she would become Franklin's wife. Tomorrow she would stand before God and the community and promise to love, honor, and cherish this man she had known for less than a week. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Saturday dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for a wedding. Rose bathed and washed her hair, then let Margaret help her dress and arrange her dark locks in an elaborate style with flowers from the garden woven through. When she was ready, she looked at herself in the mirror one more time and took a deep breath. "You are doing the right thing," Margaret said softly. "I see the way he looks at you, Rose. That young man is already falling in love with you." "I hope so," Rose whispered, "because I think I am falling in love with him too." Franklin drove them to town in the wagon, though he was not allowed to see Rose in her dress. He waited outside while she and Margaret went into the church through the side door. Reverend Walsh was there with his wife, who fussed over Rose and declared her the prettiest bride she had seen in years. When it was time, Rose walked down the short aisle on her mother's arm. The church was not full, but there were more people than she expected. Martha and her husband, Henry Roberts, the ranch hands, and various townspeople who had come out of curiosity or genuine goodwill. But Rose barely saw them. Her eyes were fixed on Franklin, standing at the altar in his best suit with his hair neatly combed. When he saw her, his eyes widened and his lips parted in surprise. For a moment he just stared, and then his face broke into the widest smile Rose had seen from him. The ceremony was simple and brief. Rose repeated her vows in a clear voice, promising to love and honor Franklin for as long as they both lived. When Franklin said his vows, his voice was rough with emotion, and his hands trembled slightly as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Walsh said with a smile. Franklin cupped Rose's face gently in his hands and bent to kiss her. It was soft and sweet and over too quickly, but it was enough to make Rose's heart race and her cheeks flush. When they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, she felt Franklin take her hand and squeeze it gently. They were married. She was Rose Miles now, a rancher's wife in Nevada. It still did not seem quite real. The townspeople threw a modest reception in the church hall, with cake that Martha had baked and punch that was probably stronger than Reverend Walsh realized. People congratulated them and welcomed Rose to Eureka, and she began to feel like maybe she belonged here after all. Franklin stayed close to her side, his hand often at her back or holding hers, and she appreciated his silent support. As the sun began to set, they made their farewells and headed back to the ranch. Margaret dozed in the back of the wagon, tired from the excitement, and Rose sat close to Franklin on the seat. He had one arm around her shoulders, keeping her steady as the wagon bounced over ruts in the road. "You looked beautiful today," he said quietly. "I know I did not say it before, but you took my breath away when I saw you in that dress." "Martha was kind to lend it to me," Rose replied. "I am glad you liked it." "I liked what was in it even better," Franklin said, then looked embarrassed. "That sounded smoother in my head." Rose laughed, surprising herself. "I know what you meant, and thank you. You looked very handsome yourself. I am proud to be your wife, Franklin Miles." His arm tightened around her. "I am proud you chose me, Rose." At the ranch, Franklin helped Margaret inside and to her room, then saw to the horses while Rose changed out of the borrowed dress and into something more practical. When he came back inside, the house was quiet except for the sound of Margaret's gentle snoring from her room. Franklin and Rose stood in the main room, suddenly awkward with each other. They were married now, and there were expectations that came with that. Rose knew what was supposed to happen on a wedding night. Her mother had given her a vague, embarrassing talk before they left Philadelphia. But knowing in theory and facing the reality were two very different things. "Rose," Franklin said, his voice gentle, I want you to know that we do not have to do anything you are not ready for. I know we barely know each other, and I do not want you to feel pressured. We can take our time." Rose looked at this kind man who had given her and her mother a home, who had spoken vows promising to cherish her, who was now offering her patience when he had every right to expect a real wedding night. "I am nervous," she admitted, "but I am not unwilling. You are my husband, Franklin. I want to be a true wife to you." Something heated in Franklin's eyes, but his touch remained gentle as he reached for her hand. "Then let us go to bed, wife, and I will do my best to make this good for you." He led her to the bedroom that had been his parents' and closed the door behind them. Rose's heart hammered as he lit a lamp and turned to face her. In the golden light, he looked younger somehow, almost as nervous as she felt. "I should tell you that I do not have much experience with this either," he said. "There was a girl once before I went off to fight, but nothing since then. So if I do something wrong, you should tell me." His honesty made Rose feel braver. "Then we will figure it out together." Franklin stepped closer and cupped her face again, as he had when he kissed her at the altar, but this kiss was different, deeper, and more passionate. Rose felt heat bloom through her body as his lips moved against hers, as his hands slid into her hair and pulled her closer. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, letting instinct guide her. They undressed each other slowly, shyly, learning the shape and feel of bodies that were still unfamiliar. Franklin was patient and careful, his hands gentle as they explored. Rose discovered that she liked the feel of his skin under her fingers, the hardness of muscle built by years of physical work. She liked the way he looked at her, with desire but also with tenderness. When they finally came together, there was pain but also pleasure, awkwardness but also connection. Franklin held her close afterward, stroking her hair and whispering that she was beautiful, that he was grateful she had come into his life. Rose felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief and hope, and the beginning of something that might become love. The next weeks passed in a blur of new experiences. Rose learned to milk cows and gather eggs from the chickens. She learned which plants around the ranch were useful for cooking or medicine, and which were poisonous to livestock. She learned to ride a horse, though not very well at first, and Franklin was patient with her clumsy attempts. She learned the names of all the cattle and could tell them apart by their markings, which amused Franklin to no end. Margaret grew stronger with rest and good food. She took over the kitchen garden, coaxing vegetables from the Nevada soil with skill born of years of experience. She mended clothes and made soap and became friends with Henry Roberts, who would often stop by the house for coffee and conversation after his work was done. Rose and Franklin grew closer with each passing day. They talked constantly, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. They worked side by side, building a partnership that was about more than just physical attraction. And at night in their bed, they learned to give each other pleasure, their initial awkwardness giving way to passion and intimacy. One evening in late September, about 6 weeks after the wedding, Rose realized she had missed her monthly courses. She said nothing at first, not wanting to get Franklin's hopes up in case she was wrong. But when another week passed with no sign of bleeding, she knew she needed to tell him. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when she gathered her courage. "Franklin, I think I might be expecting a baby." He turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Are you certain?" "Not completely, but the signs are there. I will go see the doctor in town to be sure, but I think so." A slow smile spread across Franklin's face, and then he laughed and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing too. "A baby," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "Rose, we are going to have a baby. I know we have not said the words yet, but I need to tell you now, I love you. I am completely, thoroughly in love with you." Rose felt her heart swell with joy. "I love you too, Franklin. I think I have loved you almost from the beginning, but I was afraid to say it." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Rose kissed him back with all the love and happiness bursting inside her. They had started as strangers brought together by necessity, but they had become so much more. They had become partners, lovers, best friends. They had become a family. The doctor confirmed Rose's pregnancy the following week, and Margaret cried happy tears when they told her she would be a grandmother. The ranch hands congratulated Franklin with slaps on the back and good-natured teasing. Martha Hewitt immediately began knitting tiny blankets and clothes, and the other women of Eureka slowly began to include Rose in their social circles. The pregnancy was not easy. Rose suffered from morning sickness that lasted all day, and she tired easily. But Franklin was attentive and supportive, taking over more of the household work and insisting she rest when she needed to. Margaret helped where she could, and Rose felt blessed to have her mother there to guide her through this new experience. Winter came to Nevada, cold and harsh but beautiful. Snow covered the mountains and dusted the valley, and the ranch took on a quiet, peaceful quality. Franklin spent more time inside, working on accounts and planning for the spring, which meant he was home with Rose more often. They passed long evenings by the fire, talking or reading or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. Rose's belly grew round with their child, and Franklin loved to place his hands on it and feel the baby kick. They debated names endlessly. Franklin wanted to name a boy after his father, William, and Rose agreed. For a girl, Rose liked the name Emma, and Franklin thought it was perfect. In late March of 1879, when the first signs of spring were appearing on the ranch, Rose went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Margaret stayed by her side the whole time, along with Martha Hewitt, who had experience with birthing babies. The doctor came from town and set up in the bedroom, and Franklin paced the main room, wild with worry. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, a baby's cry rang through the house. Franklin burst into the bedroom to find Rose exhausted but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. "A son," she said softly. "We have a son, Franklin." Franklin approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face of his newborn son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that were still the unfocused blue of all newborns. He was perfect. "William," Franklin said, his voice rough with emotion. "William Miles. Hello, son. Welcome to the Triple M Ranch." He bent and kissed Rose gently. "Thank you. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for choosing me. I love you so much." "I love you too," Rose whispered. "Look what we made together. Look at our family." Margaret came over to peer at her grandson, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "He is beautiful, my grandson. Oh, I never thought I would live to see this day." The months after William's birth were exhausting but joyful. Rose learned to be a mother, feeding and caring for the baby with Margaret's help and guidance. Franklin was besotted with his son, holding him whenever he could and singing off key lullabies that made Rose laugh. The ranch hands were surprisingly gentle with the baby, taking turns holding him and making silly faces to get him to smile. As William grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, happy baby, Rose felt her love for Franklin deepen even further. Seeing him as a father, watching him teach their son about the ranch and the animals, made her fall in love with him all over again. They had created a life together, both literally in William and figuratively in the home they had built. On their first anniversary in August, Franklin gave Rose a beautiful necklace he had commissioned from a jeweler in town. It was a simple gold chain with a pendant in the shape of a mountain meadow, representing their ranch and the life they had built there. "This past year has been the best of my life," he told her as he fastened it around her neck. "You came here as a mail-order bride, a stranger I had never met, but you became my wife, my partner, my love. You gave me a son and made this house a home. I could not ask for anything more." Rose turned in his arms and kissed him. "You gave me and my mother a place when we had nowhere else to go. You welcomed us with open arms and open heart. You gave me respect and partnership and love. I am the lucky one, Franklin Miles." They stood together on the porch as the sun set over the ranch, William sleeping peacefully inside with Margaret watching over him. Rose thought about the frightened woman who had arrived in Eureka a year ago, unsure if she had made the right choice. That woman seemed like a stranger now. She had been transformed by this place, by this man, by the life they were building together. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. There were hard winters when they lost cattle to cold and had to stretch their supplies. There were dry summers when the creek ran low and they worried about water for the herds. There were accidents and illnesses, moments of fear when Franklin was injured by a spooked horse or when William caught a fever that lasted for days. But there were also wonderful times. There were spring mornings when the meadow was full of wildflowers and new calves. There were autumn days when they harvested vegetables from the garden and put up preserves for winter. There were Christmas celebrations with the ranch hands and townspeople, and 4th of July picnics by the creek. In 1881, Rose gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Emma as planned. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she was as different from William as could be. Where he was serious and thoughtful, Emma was mischievous and adventurous, always getting into things she should not and making everyone laugh with her antics. Margaret was still with them, though her health was declining. She had lived to see both her grandchildren born, and she spent her days sitting in the sun with them, telling them stories of Philadelphia and their grandfather they would never meet. Rose treasured every moment she had with her mother, knowing that their time together was precious. In the spring of 1883, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 77. Rose grieved deeply, but she took comfort in knowing that her mother's last years had been happy ones, surrounded by family and love. They buried her in the small cemetery in Eureka, and Franklin made sure the headstone was beautiful, with Margaret's name and the words "beloved mother and grandmother" carved into the granite. Life on the ranch continued. Franklin expanded the horse breeding operation, and the Triple M became known throughout Nevada for producing quality stock. William grew into a capable boy who loved working alongside his father, learning everything he could about ranching. Emma was fearless, insisting on learning to ride before she was 4 and demanding to help with the cattle drives as soon as she was old enough. In 1885, Rose discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In early 1886, she gave birth to twin boys, which was both a surprise and a blessing. They named them James and Peter, and they were identical in appearance but different in temperament. James was quiet and gentle, while Peter was loud and demanding. Franklin hired more ranch hands to help with the growing workload, and they built an addition onto the house to accommodate the expanding family. The Triple M prospered, becoming one of the more successful ranches in the area. But Franklin never forgot where they had started, and he made sure to help other families who were struggling, offering work or advice or simply friendship. Rose became a pillar of the Eureka community. She helped found a school so the children of ranchers and miners could get an education. She organized quilting bees and church socials. She took meals to families in need and sat with the sick. She never forgot how Martha Hewitt had welcomed her when she was new and scared, and she tried to pay that kindness forward to others. The children grew. William became a young man who looked so much like Franklin it was startling, serious and hardworking with a gift for understanding horses. Emma surprised everyone by developing a talent for drawing and painting, filling sketchbooks with images of the ranch and the Nevada landscape. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief together, but also fiercely protective of each other and their siblings. On a warm evening in 1893, 15 years after Rose first arrived in Eureka, she and Franklin sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. William was 22 now and engaged to be married to a sweet girl from town named Sarah Thompson. Emma was 19 and had just sold her first painting to a gallery in San Francisco. The twins were 16 and full of energy and plans for the future. "You ever regret it?" Franklin asked, taking Rose's hand in his. "Answering that advertisement and coming out here to marry a stranger." Rose looked at him, at the man who had been her partner for 15 years, who had given her 4 beautiful children and a life full of love and purpose. His hair was graying at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun. But he was still the same kind, honest man who had said there was room for family here, who had welcomed her and her mother with open arms. "Not for a single moment," she said truthfully. "Coming here, marrying you, building this life with you has been the greatest adventure of my life. You are the love of my life, Franklin Miles." He smiled and brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "And you are mine, Rose. From the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, you changed everything. You made me believe in love and family and the future. You made the Triple M a home instead of just a ranch. Everything good in my life came from you choosing to take a chance on me." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Inside the house, she could hear their children laughing, the sounds of family that had filled this place for so many years. She thought about the frightened young woman who had arrived here with her elderly mother, desperate and uncertain. She had been so worried about being a burden, about not being enough. But Franklin had looked at her and her mother and simply said there was room for family here. He had opened his home and his heart, and in doing so, he had given Rose something she had not even known she was looking for. He had given her belonging. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and new challenges. William married Sarah, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the Triple M property. Before long, Rose and Franklin were grandparents to William's children. Emma eventually married a newspaper editor from Virginia City, and though she moved away, she visited often and always called the ranch home. The twins both decided to stay on the Triple M, working alongside Franklin to keep the ranch prosperous. Rose and Franklin aged together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative, had faced losses and celebrated triumphs, had built a legacy that would last for generations. The mail-order bride who had arrived with her elderly mother had become the matriarch of a thriving family, respected and loved by all who knew her. And through it all, Franklin remained her steadfast partner, her best friend, her great love. He had kept his wedding vows to cherish her for as long as they both lived, and she had done the same. They had chosen each other, first out of necessity but later out of love, and that choice had made all the difference. As Rose looked back on her life from the vantage point of old age, sitting on the porch of the ranch house with Franklin's hand in hers and their grandchildren playing in the yard, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had found her home, her family, her love in this wild, beautiful place. And it had all started with a cowboy who looked at two desperate women and said the most important words Rose had ever heard. "There is room for family here." Those words had changed everything. They had been the beginning of a love story that spanned decades, a partnership that built a legacy, a family that would endure for generations. Rose and Franklin had created something beautiful together, something that started with simple kindness and grew into a love that would last forever. And when Rose finally closed her eyes for the last time, many years later, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Franklin holding her hand as he had done for over 50 years, her last thoughts were of gratitude. Gratitude for the courage to answer that advertisement, for the chance to build a life in the West, and most of all, for the good, kind man who had welcomed her with open arms and loved her with his whole heart. Franklin followed her not long after, as if he could not bear to be parted from her for long. They were buried side by side in the Eureka Cemetery, not far from Margaret's grave. Their headstone reads simply, "Franklin and Rose Miles, beloved partners in life and love." And beneath that, "There is room for family here." The Triple M Ranch continued to thrive under the care of their children and grandchildren. The story of Rose and Franklin became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The mail-order bride who arrived with her elderly mother and the cowboy who welcomed them both became the foundation of a family that spread throughout Nevada and beyond. Their love story, which began with a desperate advertisement and a kind response, had become something legendary. It was proof that love could bloom in the most unexpected places, between the most unlikely people. It was proof that choosing kindness, choosing to open your heart and your home, could change everything. And so the legacy of Rose and Franklin Miles lived on, in their descendants who carried their names and their values, in the ranch they had built together, and in the simple truth they had demonstrated through their lives. That family is not just about blood, but about love, acceptance, and making room in your heart for those who need it. There is room for family here. Those words had started it all. And in the end, they had created a family that would last forever, bound together by love, respect, and the courage of two people who took a chance on each other and built something beautiful from that leap of faith. The Triple M Ranch stood for generations as a testament to their love, and the story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who loved her was told around dinner tables and campfires for years to come. It was a story of hope, of second chances, of love found in unexpected places. It was a story of the American West, where people came to start over, to build new lives, to find new families. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that Rose and Franklin had proven with their lives. That when you open your home and your heart, when you choose love over fear and kindness over prejudice, when you say to someone there is room for family here, you create something that will last long after you are gone. You create a legacy of love that echoes through the ages, inspiring others to take chances, to open their hearts, to believe in the possibility of happiness even when the odds seem stacked against them. Rose had arrived in Eureka, Nevada in 1878 as a desperate woman with nowhere else to turn. She had left as one half of a great love story, the beloved wife of Franklin Miles, the mother and grandmother of a family that would shape the future of Nevada ranching. She had found her home, her purpose, and her greatest love in the wild, beautiful landscape of the American West. And it all began with a cowboy who looked at a bride and her elderly mother and simply said, "There is room for family here."